Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) gunboat before coming under fire.
You want to know when a government is losing? Not when it is getting bombed. Not when its navy is at the bottom of the ocean. Not when its supreme leader is dead and its economy is in free fall. You want to know when a government is truly losing? Watch what it does the morning after someone gives it a lifeline. Yesterday, Donald Trump extended the ceasefire with Iran indefinitely. He gave Tehran breathing room. He bought it time. He kept the bombs from falling while keeping the blockade in place. And within hours of that announcement, Iran's IRGC sent fast attack boats into the Strait of Hormuz and seized 2 container ships, the MSC Francesca, the Epaminondas, both civilian cargo vessels, both attacked without radio warning. The Epaminondas hit with gunfire and rocket-propelled grenades, heavy damage to the bridge. A third vessel, the Euphoria, was struck and disabled. It is now stranded off Iran's coast. 20 crew members. No way to get it to port. Floating in a minefield. Then, as if seizing civilian ships was not enough, IRGC-linked Tasnim News Agency published a piece mapping 7 undersea internet cables running through the Strait of Hormuz, the cables that carry 90% of the internet traffic for the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. The piece described simultaneous damage to those cables as capable of triggering a digital catastrophe across the entire Gulf. Alcatel Submarine Networks, the world's largest cable-laying company, issued a force majeure notice for Persian Gulf operations the same day. No repair ships will enter the conflict zone. Any cable that gets cut stays cut. This is what a cornered regime looks like. Not powerful, not strategic. Cornered. I'm Caitlin Collins. This is BBU News. And tonight I am going to show you exactly what today's actions reveal about where the Iranian regime actually is and what it means that a government losing $500 million per day just escalated instead of negotiated. If you are not subscribed to BBU News, do it right now. Hit the bell, because this story is moving by the hour. Stay with me. Good evening. I'm Caitlin Collins. Welcome to BBU News. Today is April 22nd, 2026, day 54 of Operation Epic Fury. And in the last 24 hours, this conflict produced more simultaneous escalations than any single day since the war began on February 28th. A ceasefire extended indefinitely, 2 civilian ships seized, a third disabled and stranded, 21 confirmed IRGC, attacks on merchant vessels since February 28th, an internet cable threat that could take down the digital infrastructure of 5 Gulf nations, Brent crude surging past $100 a barrel, and Trump posting 3 letters on Truth Social S.O.S. to describe what is happening to Iran's economy. Tonight, across 8 segments, I am going to give you the complete picture, what the ceasefire extension actually means, what the ship seizures reveal about the IRGC's internal desperation, what the internet cable threat is really about, what $500 million per day is doing to the regime's ability to function, and what comes next. Let me start with what Trump actually did, because the ceasefire extension has been widely misread as a concession. It is not. Trump extended the ceasefire indefinitely, but he kept the naval blockade fully in place. He did not lift a single sanction. He did not release $1 of Iran's frozen assets. He did not ease a single condition. His Truth Social post announcing the extension was precise. I have therefore directed our military to continue the blockade and in all other respects remain ready and able, and will therefore extend the ceasefire until such time as their proposal is submitted and discussions are concluded, one way or the other. One way or the other. That phrase is not diplomatic language. That is a deadline without a date. Trump cited 2 reasons for the extension: a fractured Iranian government and a request from Pakistani mediators to give Tehran time to come up with a unified negotiating position. The second reason is the more significant one. Pakistan, the mediator that both sides trust more than any other actor in this conflict, told Washington that Iran's internal divisions are so severe that no delegation sent to Islamabad right now carries a mandate that reflects the full Iranian government. The fracture between the IRGC hardliners and the diplomatic pragmatists has reached a point where Pakistan asked for more time to let one side prevail over the other. Trump gave that time, but he kept the economic pressure at maximum intensity. Iran's response to the extension was revealing. Mahdi, Mohammedian advisor to Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf, the man who leads Iran's negotiating team, said flatly, Trump's ceasefire extension means nothing. He said the ongoing blockade is no different from bombardment. Iranian President Pezeshkian posted on X, honoring commitments is the basis of meaningful dialogue. The U.S. blockade of Iranian ports is the main obstacle to negotiations. Iran has not confirmed whether it accepts the ceasefire extension. It has not sent a delegation to Islamabad. J.D. Vance's planned trip to Pakistan has been put on hold as the White House waits for a signal from Tehran that someone over there is ready to negotiate with actual authority. And then while all of this was being processed, the IRGC moved. Let me walk you through exactly what happened this morning in the Strait of Hormuz, because the specific details matter more than the summary. The MSC Francesca, a Panamanian flagged cargo ship. It had been in the Persian Gulf since at least April 18th. It maneuvered toward the strait and turned off its AIS transponder, the automatic identification system that broadcasts a ship's location. It reappeared this morning off the coast of Iran, east of the strait. The Epaminondas, a Liberian flagged cargo ship, last detected in the Persian Gulf on April 18th, heading toward the strait. It also stopped transmitting its AIS signal before reappearing in the Strait of Hormuz this morning. At approximately 5:30 a.m. Eastern Time, IRGC fast attack boats appeared. The UK Maritime Trade Operations Centre confirmed what happened next. One IRGC gunboat approached the MSC Francesca without hailing the vessel on VHF radio, without the standard maritime warning that precedes any enforcement action and open fire. Heavy damage to the bridge. The Epaminondas was attacked with both gunfire and rocket-propelled grenades. Significant damage to the bridge. Both vessels were seized. Both were escorted by IRGC forces to Iranian coastal waters. The IRGC Navy Command issued a statement. The two offending ships were seized by the IRGC's naval forces and directed to the Iranian coast. Disrupting order and safety in the Strait of Hormuz is our red line. Read that statement again slowly. The IRGC, which just fired on two unarmed civilian cargo vessels without warning, seized them at gunpoint and disabled a third, says that disrupting order and safety in the Strait of Hormuz is its red line. The IRGC also claimed MSC Francesca had links to Israel without providing a single piece of evidence. It claimed the Epaminondas was tampering with navigation systems and jeopardizing maritime security. Iran's official state media tried a different framing, calling the seizures routine enforcement of maritime regulations. The Euphoria, a third vessel, was struck and disabled. It is now stranded off Iran's coast. It cannot be moved to an Iranian port. It cannot continue on its route. Its crew is aboard a damaged vessel adrift in waters where the IRGC has fired on 21 merchant ships since February 28th. The International Transport Workers Federation responded. Around 20,000 seafarers are stranded in the Persian Gulf right now because of this conflict. These are not soldiers. They are civilian workers who did not start this war and cannot end it. And yet they are being used as leverage. Panama's foreign ministry issued a formal statement calling the seizures a grave attack against maritime security and an unnecessary escalation at a time when the international community advocates for the Strait of Hormuz to remain open. U.S. Central Command confirmed that the number of ships turned around by the American naval blockade has now risen to 31. Most of those vessels have been oil tankers, and the blockade is not slowing down. Now, let me tell you about the development that has received the least coverage today, and which may be the most strategically significant thing the IRGC has signaled since this war began. On April 22nd, IRGC-linked Tasnim News Agency published a detailed report mapping 7 undersea internet cables that run through the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman. The cables that carry the internet traffic, banking systems, and cloud infrastructure for the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. The report described simultaneous damage to these cables as capable of triggering a digital catastrophe across the Persian Gulf. It specifically noted that the southern side of the Gulf, meaning the American-aligned Gulf states, depends far more heavily than Iran on these maritime internet routes. Iran has its own cable landing station at Jask on the Gulf of Oman coast, which was specifically built to decouple Iran's internet from Hormuz-dependent routes. Tasnim did not present this as a news story about internet infrastructure. It presented it as a map of pressure points. Alcatel Submarine Networks, owned by Nokia and the company that physically lays, maintains, and repairs most of the world's undersea cable systems, issued a force majeure notice for Persian Gulf operations on the same day. That is a legal notice to cable owners and operators that Alcatel cannot fulfill its maintenance obligations due to conditions outside its control. It means no repair ships will enter the conflict zone. Any cable fault that occurs in these waters from any cause goes unrepaired indefinitely. The cables at risk include AAE-1, which connects Hong Kong through Southeast Asia and the Middle East to Europe, MSC 5 and 6, the FALCON cable, GBI, and the To Africa cable. All of them converge near the JASC area, at the junction where IRGC underwater capability is highest and where physical access to cable routes is most feasible. The AWS data center in the Middle East South region, Azure, UAE North, Google Cloud Me Central. All of them route through Gulf of Oman cables. Any disruption would not just affect internet access, it would affect cloud computing infrastructure for an entire region. Here's what the Tasnim article is actually saying when you strip away the technical language. It is a signal from the IRGC to Washington. You have taken our oil revenue. You have taken our Navy. You have blocked our ports. Here is something you have not priced into your calculations. We know where the cables are. We know what cutting them would do. And unlike oil tankers, cut cables cannot be seized and escorted back. They just stop working. The IRGC is not leaking this information accidentally. It is communicating a threat escalation in a form that maintains plausible deniability, a Tasnim article framed as technical analysis rather than a formal military threat. That is how the IRGC signals without formally committing. Now let me tell you what is actually driving all of this, because the ship seizures and the cable threats are symptoms. The disease is what Trump described this morning in 3 letters, S.O.S. His Truth Social post was unusually direct. He said Iran is collapsing financially. It wants the strait opened immediately. It is starving for cash, losing $500 million per day. Its military and police are complaining they are not getting paid. That $500 million figure is not rhetorical. It is calculated. Before this war began on February 28, 2026, Iran's economy was already in critical condition. Years of compounding Western sanctions had destroyed its currency. The Rial had lost over 90% of its value since 2018. Inflation was running above 40% annually. Food inflation was at 105% as of February. Iran was not a functioning modern economy. It was a sanctions-scarred petrostate held together by oil, revenue, and IRGC-controlled black market operations. The blockade has now targeted both of those simultaneously. Kharg Island, Iran's offshore terminal that handles 92% of its crude oil exports, generated approximately $139 million in daily oil revenue under normal conditions. The blockade has effectively zeroed that out. The combined daily economic damage from the blockade, including secondary effects on trade, imports, and foreign exchange, approaches $500 million, the number Trump cited this morning. An Iranian economic analyst told Iran International that inflation in the country should now be measured monthly rather than annually. He said in a best-case scenario involving a comprehensive agreement, inflation could still average at least 5% per month for the rest of 2026. In a no war, no peace scenario, prices could triple over the year. In a scenario involving renewed conflict, monthly inflation could exceed 20%, pushing annual price increases toward 500%. Here's the detail that makes this economically devastating in a way that goes beyond the daily number. When oil wells are shut down without proper management of reservoir pressure, which is what happens when exports stop and production has to be reduced, the oil becomes trapped in rock pores in ways that make future extraction significantly harder or in some cases impossible. Analysts estimate that if the blockade persists, Iran could permanently lose up to 500,000 barrels per day of future production capacity. That is roughly $15 billion in permanently lost annual revenue damage that cannot be recovered even after any eventual deal. The IRGC is not just losing money today. It is destroying the financial foundations of the regime it controls for years to come. Which brings us to the question that explains everything that happened today. If the IRGC is collapsing financially, if its commanders are not being paid, if its economic leverage is being systematically destroyed by a blockade, that is more effective than the bombs. Then why did it seize 2 civilian ships this morning instead of sending a delegation to Islamabad? The answer is that the IRGC is not trying to win the economic war. It is trying to demonstrate that it still exists, that it still has gunboats, that it still controls the strait, that whatever deal gets signed, if a deal gets signed, will not happen without its blessing. The ship seizures were not a military operation. They were a political statement to Iran's own internal audience. Let me give you my honest analysis. The IRGC's behavior today, seizing civilian ships hours after a ceasefire extension, mapping internet cables as leverage, calling the blockade equivalent to bombardment, is not the behavior of a military force operating from strategic strength. It is the behavior of a mafia organization that has just had its cash flow cut off. The IRGC has always functioned as a patronage network more than a purely ideological force. It controls Iran's most profitable industries: oil, construction, telecommunications, import monopolies. It uses that cash to pay commanders, fund proxy forces across the region, and maintain the loyalty of the people who keep the regime in power. When the cash dries up, the loyalty calculations change. Trump said it plainly this morning: military and police are complaining they are not getting paid. That is not a geopolitical abstraction. That is people who carry guns deciding whether the next paycheck justifies the next order. The IRGC is aware of this. The ship seizures today were designed to project control, to tell its own officers that it still has fast attack boats, it still controls the strait, it still has leverage. The internet cable threat was designed to tell Washington that the escalation options have not been exhausted. Both gestures were for domestic audiences as much as international ones. But here's the irony that the IRGC cannot escape. Every escalation it undertakes to demonstrate strength accelerates the economic damage that is actually destroying that strength. Each ship seizure prolongs the insurance crisis that keeps legitimate cargo away from the region. Each cable threat accelerates the flight of international business from Gulf markets. Each day the blockade continues, the permanent oil production damage compounds. The IRGC is eating its own future. Reza Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah of Iran and the symbolic figure of the Iranian opposition movement, arrived in Berlin this week to meet with German elected officials across the political spectrum and address the Iranian diaspora. He said he has arrived to ensure the voices of Iranians fighting for liberation are heard. In Berlin, before this war began, hundreds of thousands of people had demonstrated against the IRGC, calling for regime change. That movement has not disappeared. It has been watching. The question that every analyst is now working through is whether the economic pressure from the blockade reaches a point of fracture before any diplomatic framework is signed, and whether the fracture comes from within the IRGC itself, from the broader Iranian population, or from both simultaneously. Trump's three-letter S.O.S post this morning suggests his assessment is that this fracture is closer than the public narrative reflects. Here is where everything stands tonight, April 22nd, 2026. The ceasefire has been extended indefinitely with the blockade fully intact. The IRGC has seized 2 civilian cargo ships and disabled a third hours after that extension was announced. 20,000 seafarers are stranded in the Persian Gulf. 7 undersea internet cables running through the Strait of Hormuz have been publicly mapped by IRGC-linked media as pressure points. The world's largest cable repair company has issued force majeure for the entire region. Brent crude is above $100 a barrel. U.S. gas is at $4.05 a gallon. Iran is losing $500 million per day. Its military and police commanders are not being paid. Islamabad Round 2 has no scheduled date. J.D. Vance has not departed. Iran has not confirmed whether it accepts the ceasefire extension or intends to send a delegation. And the IRGC, the organization that has spent 54 days insisting it is winning this war, just fired rocket-propelled grenades at a civilian cargo ship without warning, because it needed the world to know it still has fast attack boats. I want to leave you with one observation. The IRGC statement today said that disrupting order and safety in the Strait of Hormuz is its red line. That is what it said, while simultaneously being the organization that has conducted 21 confirmed attacks on merchant vessels since February 28th, laid mines that its own commanders have lost track of, and this morning fired on 2 unarmed cargo ships without radio warning. When an organization says its red line is the thing it is actively doing to others, that is not a military statement. That is a confession about where the pressure is actually landing. The blockade is costing $500 million per day. The bombs never cost them $500 million per day. And the IRGC's own spokesman told you exactly how much that hurts when it said cutting off money is the same as bombardment. They showed you where it hurts. And now the United States has a weapon more powerful than any bomb, a blockade that costs more than the entire 40-day air campaign every single day, indefinitely. Whether that weapon produces a deal or produces regime fracture before a deal can be signed, that is the question that the next few weeks will answer. And BBU News will be here for every development as it happens. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because the cables under the Strait of Hormuz, the stranded ship off Iran's coast, the commanders not being paid, and the ceasefire with no end date are all moving simultaneously, and the next development could come before this video stops trending. Tell me in the comments, the IRGC seized ships hours after Trump gave Iran a lifeline. Does that look like strategic strength to you? Or does it look exactly like what happens when a powerful organization realizes the money is running out? I'm Caitlin Collins. This is BBU News.